Now let's talk about organizations within VCAC. Now I bring this up because organizations are really the foundation of multi-tenant design in vCloud Automation Center. And what this means is we use the organization concept to map different business units, different customers, different internal groups to different sets of permissions, different sets of blueprint items within the self-service catalog. Now, why we're going over it in the identity service module is because it all relates back to users and groups, right? So maybe Joe Smith is a member of the development business unit, so therefore he gets certain catalog items based on that. So very important when we're defining the identity service and all the different external providers and users and groups to keep in mind how your organizations are going to be designed and deployed. Next, organizations allow views of the self-service catalog and branding to be customized. For instance, maybe I log into the self-service portal and I'm a developer and I get a logo up top that says Acme Company Development. And then maybe I log in as a different business unit or maybe an external customer. And that comes in and says Acme Consulting with my logo on the top. So vCloud Automation Center allows you to really customize the view that your users are seeing, and it's done through organizations. So organizations are actually mapped to these customizations because if you think about it, they're kind of their own little contained unit, right? You can make global items, you can have global settings across an entire deployment, but organizations are really the foundation for where things can be customized and where things can differ and be more specific to a unit or to something that has their own properties. Now, when we actually look at the service catalog can present global items. So maybe there's a blueprint defined for Windows Server, right? So it's a virtual machine, and this blueprint or this item specifies that a Windows machine gets deployed with these settings and this amount of performance. That's a global item, meaning any organization within my deployment here can deploy that. Now, on the other hand, you can have organization-specific ones. So maybe I know my developers typically use a CentOS VM for their testing. But really, any other business unit, so finance or IT administrators, they never use that VM, nor do I want them to be able to deploy such a thing, because they have no need for it. So let's simplify their life, and it's also more of a security piece, so they're actually not getting access to things they shouldn't have access to. So organizations allow you to define both global items and then organization-specific items that can only be deployed by a user that has permissions there. Approval workflows are also tied to organizations. So when we look at the different elements within an organization, so those elements inside a self-service catalog, you can define different approval workflows for all things in an organization or individual items. In this way, we allow the different multi-tenants here to be segmented by business unit, by group, and have their own approval workflow. So maybe an approval workflow for business unit A is a lot different than B, where they may not even have one. So the concept of organizations allows us to do that separation. When we look at reporting, so reporting on provisioning information or virtual machines, these are also separated by organization. Meaning that if I'm an administrator of my organization, so I can see all the deployments and all the resources across that organization, I still am seeing things at a much more lower level than something like at the top of a deployment. For instance, I'm going to see all the virtual machines that users inside my organization have deployed. But maybe group 2, so maybe a development group, and I'm in finance, maybe the development group has deployed, we'll say 30 VMs. I'm not even going to know those exist because the organizational separation. So that's how we really achieve that multi-tenant design so that I can only see the things that are assigned to me or the things that are relevant to my organization, and I'm not allowed to see anything beyond that. So we're limiting the scope of what you can work on and what you can see. Now, when we talk about resource allocation, those are also set at an organization level. So when you create an organization, you actually end up mapping clusters or pools of resources, so compute and memory and storage, and you wrap those to an organization. So maybe my one organization requires higher tier storage and more memory average per VM, so I'm going to give them larger pools therefore. Now, you can actually do this mapping at an organizational level so that you can separate it out maybe based on what they've paid for or based on what they should be allocated. You can give different performance and resource allocations, again, to those different organizations. One nice thing about organizations is they can also be populated from an identity source. So maybe you create an organization and you want all members of a certain Active Directory group to belong to that. The nice thing is you don't have to create all those organizations and manually map all those users and create all that work, all over again that you've already defined. You can use those Active Directory attributes and group information to populate that organization, therefore cutting down on having to redo all that work. It's a nice way of quickly getting up and running and populating those different orgs. The last thing that organizations provide is the ability to delegate administration. Now, what this means is, we'll say for each business unit or each organization, you're probably going to have someone that oversees that. So they can administer resources, they can set templates that users might deploy, they can even do approval workflows and permissioning within their own organization. But that's all. So maybe they're an organization administrator for development, but not for finance, not for QA, not for production, right? So they're limited to just their scope. Now, on the other hand, you probably have some administrators, maybe yourself or a vSphere administrator, who has visibility and can administer across all the different organizations. Then you get a system-wide organization. Then you get a system-wide administrator. So you see the difference there? You can have administrators for each of the organizations, and then you can also have global or top-level administrators that can administer everything. So that's what the concept of an organization does for you. It allows you to separate out and delegate administration to small silos of users or of resources or to the whole system.